just don't go with the default that comes with the RV. It is not going to be optimized for these sorts of redundant, reliable solutions that those of us working on the road need.
Welcome to the RV Entrepreneur Podcast, the weekly show for nomads, work campers, RVers, and entrepreneurs looking to earn a living or build a business while enjoying the RV lifestyle. This week's host is Jim Nelson. Let's settle in and enjoy the RV Entrepreneur Podcast, brought to you by RV Life.
Where is my ubiquity? What do I even mean by that? I'm Jim at RV Life, and I'm talking all about RV internet solutions on this episode of the RV Entrepreneur. And I'm honored to welcome back the experts on the subject. I first met Chris and Cherie of Technomadia fame in 2010. Yeah, almost 15 years ago. I remember they had just purchased this newfangled iPad thing, and I had some serious geek envy. But they hit the road back in 2006, long before the explosive growth in mobile internet options, before there was even any cellular broadband coverage map. So they wrote that app. And if you can think of a router, dish, booster, or data plan, they were probably one of the first to try it. As it turns out, Chris and Cherie were one of the first guests on the RVE podcast. Check the show notes for links to episodes 9, 104, and 213. Well, it's been a few years, and so much has changed so quickly that we needed to get this update out there for folks hoping to manage their business from the road. Nowadays, that means managing multiple mobile internet solutions. Spoiler alert, public Wi-Fi is last on that list. But we do address a listener question about campground Wi-Fi. And the answer to that one is money. But seriously, as mobile broadband and satellite internet options have improved over the years, we still don't have that ubiquitous connectivity I keep hoping for. Except for the one solution that provides reliable internet anywhere, and that's redundancy. So, we cover all the different options available for nomads who need a reliable connection for working from the road. Sure, we talk about Starlink, but we also discuss the Kuiper constellation Amazon is building out, and we dive deep into vSIM technology and how that differs from eSIM devices. More importantly, Chris and Cherie provide tips for selecting hardware and plans from the many providers who seem to offer the same solution. Another spoiler, they are not all alike, that's for sure. If you're wondering where to even begin when considering all of the confusing internet options and providers out there, stay tuned for our talk about assessing your needs, right after a quick word from one provider that helps make this show possible. This episode is made possible by Travelfy. Want reliable internet without the hassle? Meet Travelfy. It's portable, high-speed Wi-Fi that's ready to go wherever you are. From road trips to remote cabins. No tricky setup or permanent location required. Just plug in and you're connected. And here's the best part. No contracts, no commitments, and no reactivation fees. Pay only for the months you need. Travelfy connects to the strongest available signal among multiple major networks, so you stay online with confidence, backed by a US-based support team that knows the outdoor lifestyle. Travelfy, simplifying internet while you travel. Visit Travelfy.com today. That's TRAVLFI.com. Listeners can save 15% with code RVE at checkout. Chris, Cherie, so glad to see you guys. Welcome back to the RV Entrepreneur. It's been forever and a day.
It certainly has been, and it's great to see you guys again.
It is wonderful.
Yeah, I think we last saw you in person like 15 years ago, and that's been crazy.
And we've crossed paths, many times and not quite hooked up, but that's the life of the nomad. But first of all, I got one important thing I got to say, and that's just congratulations. I mean, you guys have done what everyone wants to do, and you've been such a resource to so many people for the, all the way back from Technomadia to the Mobile Internet Resource Center. And just want to, congratulations for what you've done, and thank you for all the service you've provided for so many nomads out there. And there will be all sorts of links in the notes to the Mobile Internet Resource Center, Technomadia blog, and all the wonderful stuff you're doing. So just had to put that out there.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And since this is the RV Entrepreneur by RV Life, and you guys are living the RV life and you are entrepreneurs, I got a couple quick questions, just kind of a lightning round to get to know you. I'm going to drop some links to your previous episodes for the whole backstory. But real quick, I got two quick questions. Like, Cherie, when did you guys first discover the RV life, and how is that different now?
Well, I started out in a pop-up camper long before I met Chris, and just we had contemplated buying an RV full time because my partner at the time, he had a job that traveled, and it was like, well, I can work remote. I ran a software company, and so we had contemplated, well, what would it be like if we bought a large RV and hit the road together? And we quickly figured out he and I were not meant to live in a small space together. But the thing that held us back was then the only mobile internet option there was HughesNet satellite. And that wasn't going to be fast enough for these sorts of things that I was doing in my business. And then fast forward a couple of years later, I met Chris, who had already hit the road solo as an RVer.
So I hit the road solo April 1st, 2006. So I'm coming up on 19 years now. Wow. And my background before that was in mobile technology. Had been in Silicon Valley and worked for the Palm Pilot company. I was their chief spy and would travel the world. And I'd been doing mobile internet and actually been a cord cutter with some early advanced technology and was really well proficient in mobile internet. I was doing stuff even before Wi-Fi existed. So I hit the road. I had this ridiculously tiny trailer with no bathroom, no air conditioning, no refrigerator, but it had mobile internet and solar power. Ran into Cherie that first year on the road solo.
Not literally.
Not literally. and in the short story is she said we just clicked like two magnets latching together. She sold her house and moved into that incredibly tiny little trailer and
new relationship. That's my only explanation.
Yes. And we combined our personal and work life. Yeah.
I remember that tiny little trailer. And since then, you guys have a bitchin' bus and a boat and a van. So how did that all evolve?
Well, we had the trailer that you met us in 15 years was our second. That was our big trailer. And then we ended up moving over to the Virgin Islands for a season and came back and realized that we still wanted to RV. We loved the RV lifestyle. We loved being able to travel around on land and meet all the people that we did, but we needed more space. That little trailer felt small when we were places for more than about a week or so at a time. So we started thinking about what we wanted, and we weren't really overly impressed with a lot of the RVs that were on the market. They all just looked the same. And we had a friend who you also met at the New RVers, Ben Wilmore, who was researching buying a vintage bus. And we kind of got the bug from him. And we decided, well, let's get a vintage bus too.
Yeah, so we bought a 1961 GM 4106, the kind that used to be like the heart of Greyhound's fleet back in the 60s. And had been converted to an RV. And we reconverted it and decked it out with solar power and all sorts of upgrades. And it just had a lot of great adventures traveling all around with our bus and redoing it.
And then we got really, really proficient with keeping up a vintage bus. We figured, well, this is easy now. We need to get a boat.
Yes.
We need to up the challenge.
What is at least twice as hard as having a vintage bus? Having a boat, because you have twice the engines and it's always trying to sink and leak and everything else. So yeah, we now divide our year between the boat, and then actually primarily that we've now gotten into van life. So we realized that getting across country to where we stored our bus on the West Coast and our boat on the East, in between, there's a lot of great stuff to see. And it's not fun to go cross country in a big vintage bus that's best out in the desert that only goes 55 miles an hour. So we got a van and fell in love with having the nimbleness of something that has a bathroom and a shower, but can fit in a regular parking spot. And, be very comfortable.
So the fleet's been working out.
Yes. No car, no house, but all the vehicles.
That's sweet. You've got the best of all worlds with all of that. And all of these command units are your mobile headquarters thanks to internet. So tell me what it means to be an entrepreneur.
It means you're supposedly in control of your schedule. I hope.
And the worst thing is your control of your schedule.
So I've been an entrepreneur all my life. My dad was an entrepreneur. He started a software company back in the 80s. I grew up with it. And what I learned was you can work from home in your pajamas. And that to me was a critical piece of being an entrepreneur, is being comfortable, being able to design my life how I wanted it and not have work rule it. That doesn't always work out that way because, as you know, as an entrepreneur, your business becomes a child that is sometimes demanding and sometimes
all-consuming. Yeah.
All-consuming and your attention when you don't necessarily want to give it.
And there were certainly times over the past many years where we would be like, we're having this incredible RV life and we're going to all these incredible exotic places, and we're looking out the window at really cool things that we never get a chance to go see or do because we're working way too hard. And so we've actually spent a lot of the last couple of years really working to dial it back and bring balance into our lives and focus more on the fun and less on the work, which has been a good project to have.
It's a challenging project. We're trying to do the same thing because it's one of the things that always come up for me. We work so hard to enjoy this lifestyle that we love so much, but we have to work so hard to enjoy it. And that there is no, live work balance. It's all in balance if you live for your work, like you and I. I mean, you are all about the mobile internet. We are all about the three-legged dogs. And it's funny, you mentioned 2006. I mean, that seems like forever. We hit the road like the next year. And I got to tell a quick story. Renee and I were on a podcast years ago, and they called us the OGs of full-time RVing. Well, you guys are the OGs of mobile internet. You've done it since the beginning. You probably see a lot of hardware before a lot of other people do. So we're going to take this deep dive into all the different options. Check the show notes here, folks. Episodes RV Entrepreneur 9. You were on the 9th episode of this thing many years ago. 104 and 213.
That's starting the road. Yes.
So way back when. We'll get all those links in the show notes. But like I said, we've met like 2010, something like that. You've seen a lot since then, RVing, boating, building the Mobile Internet Resource Center. So you've got lots of information to share. But first, we have a listener question, not necessarily about the nomadic internet, but internet for nomads. This listener asked about thoughts on the future of internet at campgrounds. Do you think campground Wi-Fi could become more stable and popular in the future? Is there any technology that campgrounds should be adopting for like the public Wi-Fi at a campground to actually be a stable option for entrepreneurs?
The key technology that campgrounds need for that is called money, and actually investing and installing. There are companies that will come in and install really good, reliable, fast Wi-Fi, but it costs a lot of money to do it right and to do it so that there's actual good speeds at each site. And we see places where we run across, like, OnSpot's a brand that seems to actually, when you run across OnSpot Wi-Fi someplace, it's like, oh, this is probably good.
Probably usable. Yeah.
Probably usable. But most campgrounds have not spent the money to invest in that. And
there's also another challenge is you need the backhaul. So you need the internet source coming into the campground in the first place. So if you've got like a 300 site campground, that's a lot of people that are wanting to stream, Zoom, video chat with friends and family, upload large video files to YouTube or download them. And that's a lot of bandwidth that has to be shared amongst a lot of people. And that's a lot of airwaves that it has to go over. So it is a challenge to be able to get a Wi-Fi network that can cover that amount of space and that amount of people in need. And so what we've seen is some campgrounds have invested in it, and you see their prices for staying there usually reflect that, or they've brought in hardwired cable to the RV sites. But I think what a lot of campgrounds are discovering is that those of us that need internet, we typically build our own solutions, because a lot of the places that we'd like to go, like right now we're at a state park in Texas, there is no Wi-Fi provided here by the campground. You go out boondocking, there's no Wi-Fi there. You go to an Army Corps of Engineer park, you go to a smaller campground or something like that, you're not going to find it there. It's mostly going to be in things with the quote unquote resorts where you're going to have it advertised. And
what people realize is, like, once you start bringing your own Wi-Fi with you, bringing your own internet with you, you stop even bothering caring about whether the campground has good Wi-Fi, because you've got it dialed in on your own. It's no longer something you even bother to check or worry about.
Yeah, if I'm paying for cellular and satellite, I'm not going to not use it if it's great and go to the campground's Wi-Fi and have this option of someone knocking me offline because they turned on their microwave next door.
Or they start BitTorrenting files or something, yes.
And they all start FaceTiming at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and then the internet just goes to crap.
Are you ready to elevate your RVing adventures? With RV Life Pro, you're not just getting a service. You're gaining a reliable companion for your journey. From planning your trips with precision to navigating with confidence and even connecting with a vibrant community of fellow RV enthusiasts, RV Life Pro is your all-in-one solution. Don't just dream about the perfect adventure, live it. Visit rvlife.com today and discover how RV Life can enhance your RVing experience.
So let's talk about some of those solutions. And I spent some time on the Mobile Internet Resource Center, rvmobileinternet.com, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. And I found one thing that really resonated with me, and that's your recommendation for redundancy. So many people ask, like, oh, what's the best internet on the road? And my answer is always redundancy. If you want to work reliable internet anywhere, you need multiple different carriers, providers, satellite, cellular, that sort of thing. So if you need to stay connected and you must have multiple options, aside from redundancy, or maybe encompassing redundancy, what is your guys' top 3 picks for staying connected? Not necessarily in any particular order, or rank them as you see fit, but like 3 options for people on the road when they want to stay connected. What do you recommend for 2025 and beyond?
So I think having at least 1 or 2 cellular carriers in your arsenal,
different carriers,
we call them an arsenal of mobile internet solutions, is critical for those that are going to be mobile. I mean, if you're going to one spot and you're staying there, or you're going seasonal, you might be able to optimize for one solution. But if you're going to be mobile, what works best is going to be a different solution at each place. So we would highly recommend at least 1 or 2 cellular carriers in arsenal.
And when we're talking about carriers, it's important to think of not just the branded carrier that you're seeing, but actually the cellular network behind the scenes. Because in the United States, there's only 4 nationwide cellular networks. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Dish Network. And then US Cellular is a very large regional, but they don't have nationwide coverage. So any other brands you see, or any other resellers, they're having one of those networks behind the scenes. And so it doesn't do you too much good to have 2 networks that are both using T-Mobile behind the scenes, because if there's no T-Mobile tower, you're out of luck. If you want to have like Verizon plus T-Mobile, or AT&T plus Verizon, or say some combination of 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, even, because we can find enough good deals.
So how do people determine those carriers behind the scenes when they're just selecting these options, like especially when it comes to, the vSIM technology we'll talk about in a minute? But how do you know who the carrier is, aside from buying a Verizon or an AT&T phone?
So there are official prepaid brands, and there are mobile virtual network operators, or MVNOs. On the prepaid brands, they are usually owned by the carriers at this point in time. So those are pretty straightforward. So you know that Visible is on Verizon, because it says Visible by Verizon right in the logo. Mm-hmm. Next, you go to the mobile virtual network operators. They're not necessarily allowed to tell you which carrier they're on, but there's usually strong hints.
They'll say the purple plan, or the red plan, or the blue plan, and it's like,
Or they'll show you a coverage map, and then you can go in
and compare
it to the carrier's coverage maps, and kind of, it's like, oh yeah, that looks like Verizon's. Or us, we have them memorized because we invest this stuff too much. So those are usually the typical ways you're going to know.
So speaking of coverage, you guys still operate the Coverage app, do you?
Yes, we do. That
was over a decade.
Time for a shameless plug. How do people find decent coverage in their area?
So we wrote an app for that way back in the day. I think we hadn't even thought of it when we were at that New RVers meetup 15 years ago. But we got tired of, we would get to a location and not be able to get online because we didn't have signal, and we didn't know where to go, or if another carrier might have coverage. And at that point, you can't go see the carrier's coverage map. So we said, well, wouldn't it be neat if we could have the coverage maps on our phone and have them offline? So
you could just pick between carriers or combined, so you can see, if you're carrying 2 carriers, you can see a map that is Verizon plus AT&T. Then you've got a combined personal map.
Yep, and it separates it down by 5G plus, 5G regular, 4G, and all the different flavors of cellular coverage. So you can hone in on it. It's like, I need super fast speeds. I need to go somewhere with 5G.
So that was our second hit in the App Store, and it
it's
still there after a decade.
And we've used it a number of times. Remind our listeners the name of that app for getting good coverage.
It's called Coverage with a question mark.
The coverage app. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So we also dropped a bunch of
iOS.
acronyms in the past few minutes that they actually blew by me and maybe some of our listeners. But one that sticks out with me always is VSIM, VSIM. And that's when it comes to your mobile cellular broadband devices. Can you explain? I mean, most people know a phone comes with a SIM. It's a chip that goes in the card. But could you just kind of give us an overview of what VSIM technology is and maybe some tips about those chips for choosing hardware and a provider when there's so many out there that seem to be offering the same thing?
So there's different types of SIM cards. There's a physical SIM card that we're all used to. The carrier gives it to you. You put it in. Well, phones don't take them as much anymore, but you put it into your mobile hotspot device or your router, and that SIM card stands for Subscriber Identity Module, is what SIM stands for.
That's where your plan lives, basically.
It's basically a unique serial number that goes back to the carrier that says, oh, they're subscribed to this $50 a month plan with 50 gigabytes of data. And then there's eSIM, which is now what a lot of the phones are coming with.
Embedded SIM.
Or electronic SIM.
Yeah,
You can stand for either. And that's basically the SIM is embedded inside of the device, and you can remote activate it with the carrier of your choice and have it inside electronically. And then vSIM is not a term that we hear too.
It's more of a marketing term used by certain devices that behind the scenes they're using eSIM, but it's devices that have kind of a plan locked to a particular provider that behind the scenes that provider then is downloading different eSIMs from their data bank to that device, like a hotspot that you have that has a multi-carrier plan, so they can behind the scenes, depending on what your current coverage is, download from their database behind the scenes. We'll give you a Verizon plan or an AT&T plan or a T-Mobile plan.
So it's like checking it out of a library.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's because the SIM itself, whether it's or virtual or a physical chip, like you said, is assigned to a particular plan. Are there any providers or hardware that can be ramped up on the fly or added to on the fly, like in a hosting plan that's a scalable cloud hosting plan? Is there any sort of mobile internet technology out there that scales as you need it, whether or not it requires your intervention? Can you like scale up that device by deploying a new SIM to it?
Oh, there are data plans that you can add data to without going into overage charges.
Sure.
And also plans that you can raise to a higher tier of network priority. So some plans have very low priority on the network, some have higher priority. So you can adjust what your plan is, with a carrier or some providers might allow you to do that by, opting into a higher tier of data for the month.
There are some resellers who have purchased a lot of data plans. Maybe they've gone and purchased bulk data. They call it pooled data from a distributor, and then they can allocate that data however they want in their plans. And they might have options to say, oh, if you're hitting your cap, we can add more data to it and things like that. So there are sometimes some flexible plans like that.
Oh, wonderful. So kind of got off track a little bit here about our top 3 plans. It sounds like the first one we've talked about has been cellular broadband internet, ideally with multiple providers. What would be another option for internet on the road for the entrepreneur?
Obviously, the elephant in the room is Starlink. It should be a consideration for, I think, any RVer at this point in their mobile internet setup. Just realizing that there are some caveats to it. I mean, obviously, it's great. It gives you broadband internet in places where cellular can't reach. But there are some downsides. It is kind of pricey, $160 a month now, I think it is, for their unlimited roam plan. If you're paying for cellular too, it's like you might be tempted to go Starlink only, and some can go Starlink only.
We hear from people out on the West Coast who are like desert campers that they're like, Starlink is the best thing ever, and it's always connected and super reliable. And then we hear from people on the East Coast who camp under trees or who like shade, and they're like, Starlink is absolute garbage. I can never get a stable signal. It's constantly dropping out. I can't do a video chat ever. And I'm like, trees, desert.
So you do need a fairly decent view of the sky. It's gotten a lot better the more satellites they launch. the less view of the sky you need because there's more satellites for it to lock onto. But it also uses a decent amount of power. Like the standard dish is about equivalent to a residential refrigerator sort of power.
So boondockers can be...
You have to plan that into your whatever your off-grid power budget is. The mini dish is a lot better, uses about half of that. And then the thing that a lot of people forget is Starlink is still a young company. And they're still figuring out their business model. And it's very expensive to launch this sort of satellite constellation. Sure. And we have seen, since we've been tracking them, multiple rate increases and plan changes that have completely made the plan different to consider and how you consider it. And they don't do it with grandfathering and things. They just say, hey, in 15 days, your price is going up $30 a month.
Yeah, whereas cellular providers, for the most part, have more of a history of, if you get a really good plan, and like we have plans that we've had active for over a decade, you keep that plan, and you just, as long as you keep paying for it, you keep that plan, even if it has terms way better than anything you can currently get today. So we've got like some grandfather unlimited plans that have wonderful terms in the cellular world if you know to jump on them and grab them and keep them right.
Fantastic. So I got to ask about that elephant in the room. What about folks out there that might just have a particular boycott against a certain satellite internet constellation for whatever reasons? It could be, astronomy or politics or cost or whatever. Is there any alternative satellite internet? I had RV Datasat for years. I had, Motosat way back when. I understand HughesNet still has a tripod solution or something, but is there any alternative to Starlink out there for satellite internet?
So right now, for broadband internet, no. All the other satellite options that are out there are either really aimed at residential, and they're also geostationary, and that means you're going to have latency, which, from having lived with that, if you're doing interactive things like Zoom calls or things like that, that's going to make it really, really difficult to use in those sorts of capacities. So Starlink has the advantage there. Now, in the future, we do have Amazon that is,
they're working on Project Kuiper, which is
Kuiper. I was going to ask about that.
And they have got their first test satellites up. They've just had their basically Amazon Blue Origin's first rocket had a successful orbital launch. So over the next several years, Amazon is spending billions of dollars to bring their own constellation online. So they are years behind Starlink, but they also have very, very deep pockets and are very committed to this. So by this time next year, we might actually be able to say, hey, Kuiper has got some interesting plans, and they're starting to play catch up with Starlink. And 5 years from now, it might be an interesting, two-horse race. And there actually are other constellations in the works too that will start to change the game. So Starlink is way, way ahead right now, but it is not the only game in the pipeline.
But the good news is if you want to not have the expensive Starlink, or you don't want to use Starlink for whatever reasons, we personally have not activated our Starlink in over a year. You can get by perfectly fine with cellular.
Particularly if you have multiple carriers.
As long as you don't want to go to places there are no cell towers. That is the caveat.
And people would be amazed, when we talk about our coverage app, it was really a very super useful app back when coverage was like small islands with big empty spaces in between. It's now reversed, where there's like little nooks and crannies where there's not great coverage. And particularly when you combine coverage maps between multiple carriers, 5G has gotten really, really good and really, really fast across a lot of the country. And oftentimes in a lot of places, and actually many, many places, run circles around what Starlink can do. Just yesterday, I had a over 100 megabit per second upload speed.
Upload, not download.
Not download, upload, which is like 10x what you'd see on a typical Starlink connection. That's sort of the kind of work we do with video and stuff. Sometimes upload is way more important than download. So cellular is really, really great in a lot of places. And a lot of people who have kind of their old experience of cellular mapped and maybe have old cellular gear, if they were to upgrade to better gear, better antennas on the roof, the latest 5G technology, they'll be like, dang, this cellular's gotten really good. Except when you go to those places where there's absolutely no cellular, then you're like, oh, time to turn on the Starlink again, which you can do very easily. There's just like the 50 gigabyte plan.
Yeah, they now have the backup plan. So we keep the dish installed. And if we do get somewhere where it is our only option, we'll turn it on.
It takes 2 taps and $50, and we've got enough Starlink to get us by.
So real quickly, explain the type of hardware you're talking about where you can add the Starlink into the router, have the multiple carriers. It's one of these, SIM routers like a Peplink or something like that, I presume.
Yep. So option number 3 is what I would put as our topic, was having something that can bring these multiple options together. It is your redundancy manager when we talk about that. So, if you have all these on individual devices, let's say you get a mobile hotspot device for a cellular plan and you have your Starlink with its router. Well, each of them is broadcasting its own unique Wi-Fi network. And then you have to have each of your laptops or other devices pick which network you want to be using at any one time, which can get annoying. And
very confusing.
So if you have a central router that can bring in these multiple internet sources into one place, then you're broadcasting just one Wi-Fi network or Ethernet network, depending upon how you have your setup. And then all your devices are just connecting to that. And then you're managing what your backhaul is or your connectivity is with these multiple options.
And in particular, like routers like Peplink have the ability to do bonding. Peplink's name for that is speed fusion bonding, where you're actually combining multiple connections together into one virtual connection, and you're getting the some speed benefits, but mostly just the reliability benefits of if one connection goes down, you don't even know it. You don't even see a glitch in your video call that you're doing because all these connections that you have. And in our testing on our boat, I've actually had 11 simultaneous connections bonded together at once. They're all just running and it just works.
And just caveat, no one needs 11 connections at once. We only do that.
Yes. maybe 9, right?
9 is good. Yeah, 9, but 11, no.
For some of the listeners, that is important when you're running a mission critical application, or you got to be on 24/7, or you're on that particular Zoom call with your community. These type of solutions will allow some failover and or redundancy without having to flip any switches and say, hold on, I'll be right back, and switch over to the hardwired network. So real quick, folks, those top 3 recommendations are cellular broadband, satellite internet, which is kind of only one elephant in the room right now, and a redundancy manager of some sort. The last option is redundancy, and that redundancy could include public Wi-Fi at certain places where you might need to drive to town. Because real quick about that, the coverage maps are great, but they don't count for elevation. And we had a job lined up and we arrived because it was wonderful 5G coverage, and we showed up and we drove down to the river, and that 5G was a couple hundred feet over our heads. So we had terrible access, and without our satellite internet, we chose not to take that job. So redundancy.
And very, very tall antennas on masts. Or one of the weirdest products we ever had offered to us to test at the Mobile Internet Research Center was a company that had a balloon that you could launch and carry a tethered hotspot. That actually put your hotspot in a bag and put it up on a balloon way, way up there. It's like, okay.
That might have worked in this particular situation because that area was covered with trees and we just had to pass on it. This episode is made possible by Travelfy. Want reliable internet without the hassle? Meet Travelfy. It's portable, high-speed Wi-Fi that's ready to go wherever you are. From road trips to remote cabins. No tricky setup or permanent location required. Just plug in and you're connected. And here's the best part. No contracts, no commitments, and no reactivation fees. Pay only for the months you need. Travelfy connects to the strongest available signal among multiple major networks, so you stay online with confidence, backed by a US-based support team that knows the outdoor lifestyle. Travelfy, simplifying internet while you travel. Visit travelfy.com today. That's TRAVLFI.com. Listeners can save 15% with code RVE at checkout. So regarding Kuiper, I did want to talk about that. You think it's about a year out still, at least, before there's actually plans available? This is the Amazon solution?
So if everything goes according to Amazon's most ambitious plans, by the end of 2025, they might be ready to start talking about it and do some beta testing service that will have probably dropouts. So it will not be a 24/7 always there, but it'd be like, okay, you can start to have a little bit of experimentation with Kuiper, and that'll probably be testing mostly with commercial companies and there are people who are more kind of network partners. I would be surprised depending on how fast they're able to ramp up their launch cadence, I would be surprised if it's this time next year we might start to see what a consumer offering from Amazon looks like. They've shown what their antennas will look like. They've shown off a lot of the stuff. They know how to build the technology. It's just they now have to launch a lot of things. Right. And once we start seeing their launches lined up on the pad and see how fast they're going to actually do it, it'll become pretty clear.
Right.
You'll be able to extrapolate them. But right now they've only launched 2 test satellites. So they've got to start.
So it's a ways off.
Yeah. It's a ways off. It is not something that you should put off your purchasing decision.
There you go. And I'm sure you guys know much more than I, but I read a little bit about the technology, and I understand it should be, quote unquote, faster and more secure because they're using laser connectivity between the satellites instead of radio.
Well, Starlink has been doing that too for several years now as well. But yeah, Kuiper is using a laser mesh between the satellites. Starlink has been there for a while now as well. And that is a part of helps the satellites talk to each other, so they need less ground stations. It's part of how they get ocean coverage. One of the things that RVers should be aware, though, is Kuiper is not planning on Alaska coverage. So people who do want to travel north and south, if Starlink is global, Kuiper is doing basically a belt around the Earth instead of full global constellation. So that is something that even once they get all their satellites launched, that's not going to change. They've got a band of coverage north and south of the far north and the far south of the planet will not be getting Kuiper at any time soon. Anything that has been filed with the FCC far.
And I didn't mean to start any conspiracy theories. I want to clarify, we're not talking about space lasers pointing down at the Earth, delivering any connections, which would probably be blazing fast and pretty dangerous. These are satellite communicating with each other by laser.
Yes.
So where's my ubiquity? How long is it going to be until we have something palm-sized? Currently there's devices out there that talk to the satellites and you get basic texting or SOS type service in your hand. When and where will we see that simple tabletop device that gives us satellite internet anywhere, or blimp based, or let's look out into the future? What do you guys know? When's it coming?
Well, there's right now, any iPhone from the last 3 years has direct to satellite capabilities. It's just super slow text messaging.
Right.
T-Mobile and Starlink and SpaceX, they have got a piggyback payload that people get very confused. They think that it's, I'm going to be able to get Starlink on my T-Mobile phone. But no, it's actually it's a T-Mobile cell tower piggybacking on top of a small percentage of Starlink satellites that will broadcast a cell signal from space, where a huge area, like hundreds of square miles, are sharing a signal. So it's very slow. It's going to be limited to text messaging first, but over time, as there's more satellites that have direct to cell payloads, you will start to have basic slow data speeds that will work on all sorts of devices straight from space. But ground-based cell towers, when they're around, will always be kind of the primary. That'll just help fill in the coverage gaps with regular cellular devices. And then if you need fast speeds, that's when you'll still need a full-size Starlink or a Starlink Mini or a Kuiper Mini or something like that, something that's got a bigger physical antenna. There's no defined laws of physics there when you're away from those cell towers.
So with all these different solutions, where does someone begin? You guys have so many guides on your mobile internet research center, but I also remember Technomadia way back when had a great solar power consumption assessment guide. Do you guys have a guide or just a quick overview of where to begin? I'm going to hit the road and I'm going to need internet. There's all these solutions. Do I need to buy the most expensive? What scales? Where does someone begin when determining their nomadic internet needs?
So a lot of our content is geared around starting from the beginning. And we think that the first thing you need to do is to assess your unique needs. So you need to define what it is you need to be able to do online. Are you just answering emails as part of your work? That's a very different scenario than someone who needs to be able to do high demand, critical, interactive video calls,
remote medicine.
Yeah. If you're doing remote medicine and things like that, dropouts could be a literal life or death situation. If you're teaching online classes where if you drop out, your students, or you could lose your job sort of situations, it's a very different scenario than someone who can log in once or twice a week and upload whatever documents they've been working on for the last week offline. So you need to really understand how critical internet is, how much data that you need to use in a month. Do you need just 20? Remember when 20 gigabytes was a lot of data? That's what it was when we launched the Mobile Internet Resource Center 10 years ago. But these days, is 100 gigabytes enough a month? Is that going to feel tight, or do you want really, truly unlimited? Is how much data you need to use. You also need to, what are your minimum upload and download speeds that you need to use to accomplish what you need to do online? And then an important factor is, what is your travel style? Mm-hmm. Are you going to a seasonal site where you're going to be there 3 or 4 months at the same site for the winter, and where you really can optimize your solution? Or are you like us? We move around every few days, where every single location we go to, we have a different set of scenarios and challenges in our connectivity solution. Are you boondocking? Do you need to be taking into consideration your power consumption? Are you going into congested areas? Are you going to go to city centers? Are you going to be spending a lot of time in quartzsite this time of year, where there's a whole lot of RVers that are using those cell towers and satellites?
Mm-hmm. So the more you think it through, is just understand what your needs are, and then realize that throwing money at the problem is usually the worst thing you can do. Because we do see a lot of people who are like, okay, I just want to buy the most expensive thing and just have it be done and be simple. But it's like, that's signing up for a lot of complexity. And if you don't need that sort of complexity, you might be better off with a simpler, more basic solution. And we talk to a lot of people, and they're like, well, for what I need to do, I can get by with just a tablet with an unlimited plan for $20 a month and a tablet. Yeah, that might fit your needs. Perfect. You do not need this big fancy router. And other people were like, no, actually that $2,000 router with multiple antennas on your roof and also
$300 a month of data plans. Yeah, that is what you need to do what you're doing. and you need a backup plan from that.
And a backup plan for that.
Yes. Unfortunately, it's not as simple math as calculating out what a solar system you might need, the power needs. There's so many variables. And then the biggest variable is every single day this stuff changes. Yeah, right. When we launched the Mobile Internet Resource Center a decade ago, there were literally 2 hotspot devices on the market, 1 cellular booster, 2 or 3 Wi-Fi repeating systems, and 3 data plans. We thought, this will be easy. We'll just write this website, we'll write this one book, and we're done.
And then we had to revise the book, then do this and this, and suddenly we had a website and an online community and thousands of pages of content.
I think we now track about 400 unique pieces of gear for mobile internet setup. We have about 120 different data plans to choose from. So it's a lot, and it is overwhelming. And what we focus on is helping people build a foundation of understanding what the options are out there so that they can best evaluate what the options are as they come available. And then we have interactive forums to help our members out. So we're all member funded. We don't sell this stuff. Right. We don't.
That's why we're not trying to push one particular solution. We're not biased. We try to steer people to we talk people out of spending money very often.
And saving money. And instead of taking affiliate kickbacks, we give those kickbacks to our members as in forms of extra discounts so that they can save more money on that. But then we also do, for those that desire it, we do offer private advising for those that want someone to help have a kind of a second set of eyes. We do have an assessment worksheet that helps you really focus on the things that are important when making these considerations. And we do have several guides that help you figure out just how much data you might need.
I'm glad you mentioned the guides, because I saw some of those earlier today and I wanted to bring those up. And if anyone is getting started and they don't know what they might need, go to the Mobile Internet Resource Center and check out the guides to help you get started. They have so much free content there. It's amazing. But when it comes to all of these solutions and someone's looking at the guides and they're assessing their needs, how can they protect themselves with their investment? What type of hardware, or without naming brands necessarily, but what can scale with what you guys are seeing in the future? If they're investing, $1,000, $1,500 in hardware to get going, what's the best thing to look for when you want that to last at least a few years?
So the first thing is look at the technology that's inside of it. So if you're going with a cellular device, look for the most modern modem that you can get. The more modern of a modem that you can get, the more it's going to carry you forward and not be obsolete.
And look for stuff that supports multiple carriers and multiple bands, because there's a lot of the lower end stuff on the market is really only optimized for one particular carrier or another. And over time, or particularly as you start to add redundancy to your setup, you might find yourself boxed into a corner with something that is okay on AT&T, but is going to never connect to the best bands that Verizon has, and so forth. So having a system that, even if in the future even if you're starting with one carrier, just think ahead. Will this be compatible with others as I add them?
How do you cut through the marketing and all the hype? Because I know of a particular bike device that I tested and was gifted long ago, and it's now a battery pack. I mean, it supposedly will switch providers and find the best one in your area, but it would get fapped, the fair access policy type thing, where all of a sudden it slows down and it's just not reliable for business. And now it's a battery. So with so many different providers, and they all say they do the thing so well, how do you get behind that? How do you find out the information you need? Just go ask you guys?
Well, that is why we started the mobile and resource centers. We started to see a lot of these companies popping up and selling things that their marketing was not matching the reality of what they were offering. So that's why we went with an unbiased stance, and not having affiliates, kickbacks. We're not sponsored or anything like that, so that we can educate our communities on what is really going on and what the real technologies are. And then, so what we advise is, if you really want to go and find the right solution for you, is don't go by marketing. Don't, just because an influencer might have gotten paid or is getting affiliate kickbacks to promote an option does not necessarily mean they understand what the option is.
And a lot of things, in particular, when they sound too good to be true or seem really out of whack with other things on the market, they probably are. And behind the scenes, there's been plenty of examples in the past of things that were resellers selling data plans that kind of were like flea market materials that fell out of the back of a truck. They're not official, and they eventually get shut down at the source. And if you go in educated, you can be like, okay, I'm going to use this until it doesn't work. And it might be 3 months from now, it might be a year from now before the plug gets pulled, but it's a great deal. I'll take advantage of it. But have that in mind and have your reserve parachute of like, I'm taking advantage of this crazy good deal for now, but I already have my plan B ready to go, turned on, active, and it's there for me. Because we've seen so many people get burned by thinking they had this incredible plan. It was promoted on YouTube, and then suddenly all those plans got turned off overnight because the company is under investigation, and oh good boy. That's
leaving a lot of people hanging with no support. I remember some of those that went through, and thank God I never had one of them. But you said something there about community, and I think that's so important, especially on this show with the RVE community group and such, and the summits we've had. It sounds like one of the number one tools for mobile internet and figuring out what you need is education and references. So tell me a bit about, like, when did you guys start to, switch from just providing information to hosting a community, and what was the benefit of that? Talk to me about the benefits of community and how that came on board for you guys.
Well, so, back in the day, I ran a software company and he was doing consulting. And we were doing just dabbling with apps, but, we ran the Technomadia blog, and he would just occasionally do a blog post talking about whatever internet solution that we were using now. And he'd be, talk about, 4G, and he'd go all geeky on it. And so we started getting a lot of followers as more and more people were hitting the road and asking questions. So we started a Facebook group called Internet for RVers. After my father passed away and I decided to shut down the software business that I was running with him, I decided, it's like, well, I'll just write a book. I'll take all these blog posts that he's written. I'll write a book. We'll make it available as an ebook, I think we sold it for $5, and said, here, and that'll help people learn. And then we can go off and find what's next for us. And I was answering a lot of questions in that Internet for RVers group. And, I was just spending a lot of my free time answering those questions. And I would just get frustrated with the number of questions, and people we didn't have content to point them to except for buy the book. And people would like, I'm not spending $5 on any book. Just tell me the answer. And, that got frustrating after a while. And then someone came to us and said, you guys should be getting paid for doing this. And I'm like, point, the answer was get Verizon. Yeah, I mean, it was a simple answer back then.
But it was Verizon. A simple direction. Yeah, so, a few simple steps. But
no one's going to pay me to tell them get Verizon. And they said, you'll be surprised. So we launched an Indiegogo campaign to rewrite the second edition of the book. And the stretch goal on that was, if we get funded at this level, we will start a website in some sort of community. And that community started as a private Facebook group where basically people who had bought in and supported this project were able to ask questions of us. And it was in a space where we knew that we were appreciated and not just answering questions from the thousands of people out there.
And that just grew and grew. And we built a website and a resource center around that. And the community has just been thriving of people who like, this is a valuable resource and we've got a place for it. And we just, everything we've done, we've designed it so that the bulk of our content always remains free. We kind of think of ourselves like a PBS station where we have lots and lots and lots of public content, but then the in-depth stuff is there for people who want to go further. And we don't do any marketing or advertising. It's just all word of mouth. It's like, hey, if you want to go deeper into this, step in through the door, join the community, go into the forums, and
go to the we have a video course that will, those that are video inclined. We have our forums. We do webinars regularly with our members so we can all get together and we'll answer questions and people will share their experiences either in the forums or there's webinars.
And then we've actually built a whole team that does this now. So there's now, particularly for the work-life balance on our part, when we were dying doing all of this, is we now have a team of 8 of us total that are all kind of work part-time to stay on top of. We have people who focus on different areas of specialty. So we've got one person who's like, Starlink is their mission, and that is
another one's an antenna guru, so he can help advise our members on what are the best antennas for both installation and performance.
And he actually takes antennas apart because he's an engineer, and he will dissect them and show why this antenna works better than this antenna, and that sort of geeky level detail.
So I tell lots of people, no matter what the niche, never underestimate the power of community. And it's clearly working out for you guys because it's great to get the advice and there's plenty of free information available. But when you get, real case use scenarios from other people that are doing something you want to do, it's really beneficial. What are some of the common mistakes you've seen people make? Back to the internet technology. What should people not do when they start buying hardware or buying plans?
Don't just throw money at the problem. If just going out and buying the most expensive solution does not necessarily get you the best solution for you.
And don't copy your favorite YouTube influencers' videos, and just because their needs might be different than yours, even if their solution is still current and valid, what they're optimizing around could be completely different than your personal needs. And we see so many people fall into that trap of saying, I want what he has or she has.
And then not even understand it. Like there's like someone had gotten a dual modem router many, many years ago. And that video just, took off. And so many people went and bought this dual modem router, not understanding it. And it's like, well, why do I need to buy 2 data plans for this? It's like,
it really was crazy how many people who come to us and they had this router that they bought because of this one particular video and they only had one SIM card in it. And we're like, you are missing
the prime benefit of this particular router and this solution. So it's take the time to understand the options that are out there and your unique needs. And, a lot of RVs, when you buy them from the dealership, they're coming pre-installed with equipment. Unless your needs are very basic, and I would think most people listening to this podcast, they're not going to be basic. Just either ask your dealer to leave it off and don't pay for it. Just don't go with the default that comes with the RV. It is not going to be optimized for these sorts of redundant, reliable solutions that those of us working on the road need.
Case in point here, we recently bought a new RV and there's a newfangled antenna on the roof with a little, logo on it that I could unclip. And I looked to see what it is, and it's nothing that would work to meet my needs. But there's an enclosure and a hole in the roof. So that's all I need for the antenna I have in the bay. It all comes back to education, and you guys offer so much of it. What's next for Technomadia and the Mobile Internet Resource Center and Chris and Cherie? What's on the horizon?
We have no idea.
we spent because so many people were able to hit the road and work remotely with COVID that the Mobile Internet Resource Center exploded like crazy, and so many people now are having that permission to work from the remote road being dialed back, and things are kind of moving back to more of a saner equilibrium. And we've dialed ourselves back to trying to be semi-retired and let the workload be distributed across our team. And so we're focusing on enjoying boat life and enjoying van life and spending more time seeing the outside and not being online constantly, which has been a really good shift for us.
The Mobile Internet Resource Center will still be there. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are choosing the easy. There's a lot of easy options out there these days, like just going and buying Starlink, and a lot of people that will work for the majority of their needs, and they're happy with it. So we are seeing that the in-depth content that we create, not as many are seeking out these redundant solutions, because there's just not as many of us working remotely, folks who
need extra redundancy.
So already have experienced that, hey, just this one solution alone is not going to meet my needs. And a lot of people can no longer work remote, as we saw just 4 years ago. So, as long as the Mobile Resource Center is allowing us to not dip into savings yet, then in our early retirement, it'll still be there. So,
yeah.
So congratulations on the quote unquote retirement, early retirement, semi-retirement, and live work balance.
Yeah.
The whole balance thing.
Yes, the whole balance thing is the goal.
We're going to need to get you back to talk all about that, because we all want that balance. Where's the best place people can turn if they want to learn more about this kind of stuff?
Well, so the Mobile Internet Resource Center is at rvmobileinternet.com, and our personal blog, which goes back to the beginning of time, is
our time.
the beginning of just about
is at Technomadia. And we do have YouTube channels for both. The Mobile Internet Resource Center, we try to put out a couple of videos. We do newscasts, basically news stories, whenever there's a new data plan or
a new Starlink thing or
change in things. So, if you are more video focused, we do have the Mobile Internet Resource Center YouTube channel. And those are the best places to reach us right now. So.
Fantastic. And when you hear about that ubiquity that I want so badly, and that magic device that I can put in my pocket and get online anywhere, please let us know. Chris, Cherie, thank you so much for joining us and all you do.
It was a pleasure to be here.
15 years. Wow. It's mind-boggling to think how mobile internet technology has changed since we first met Chris and Cherie. There's been so many advancements over the years, but also quite a few flops that have left users holding pretty useless hardware. I'm also blown away by the amount of resources they provide and the community they've built at rvmobileinternet.com. And I highly recommend you check out some of their guides if you're wondering where to begin. Speaking of community, what are you using to get online? Are you a total Starlink fan? Or are you holding out for that ubiquity I keep mentioning? Give us a shout in the RVE community group to see what your fellow tech nomads think. And if you're currently weighing your options for something better, remember,
throwing money at the problem is usually the worst thing you can do.
Bid farewell to the stress of travel planning with RV Life Trip Wizard. This feature allows you to customize your routes, avoid potential hazards, and even discover the best campgrounds based on real user reviews. It's not just about reaching your destination, it's about enjoying the journey. And with RV Life Trip Wizard, every journey is effortless. Learn more about this game-changing feature at rvlife.com.